So if any of you guys have seen my YUI Theater talk on this is pretty much a rehash of that. I'm just going to show some of the new stuff that I've been working on after it. But it was kind of required for some of the other talks that people are going to be talking about YUI 3 and Node.js. So you really need to know what I'm doing so you can understand what they're doing. I'm just going to tell you guys straight out, I'm a hacker. I write code and I do cool stuff with it. I have 2 slides, so I'm going to be showing code. If you guys can't see it, let me know. I'll bump the font up as much as I can, but that's all I'm going to be talking about is code. I'm going to show you code. I'm going to show you it running, and I'm going to show you the examples that I've been working on. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I got my heckler up here. I can't do a talk without Christian giving me a hard time. So this slide says it all. I mean, this is why you would use YUI 3 on Node.js, just because they're that awesome. YUI 3, from the core, YUI 3 is designed around being modular and being small, being very simple to piece together the little things that you need. But it's also very, very smart on knowing that if you need one thing, get me 4 or 5 other things. So this kind of left it in a really, really good state to run inside of Node, because Node on the server, you need it to be fast and you need it to be very configurable. But you also don't necessarily need, a browser. You don't need DOM. What you really want from YUI 3 is the fact that we have our loader, and our loader is fantastic. I mean, the fact that it can pull YUI 2 and 3, it can pull gallery modules, it can pull all of our code. That left it in a really prime spot on the server to be able to do the exact same thing. Now, the reason it's able to do that is because of our module system. So the fact that each one of these little modules are contained in their own little callback, their own little scope, and they're all named. So I was able to go in on the server and just tell Node, tell the version of YUI on the server that get, how YUI goes out and fetches a remote script. It uses get to put in a script tag in the page. Well, I was able to go on the server and just say, hey, I've got this new module called get. And I just went in and wrote a small little module that used the built-in Node.js client to go out and fetch the remote resource instead of putting a script tag on the page. Now that was just pretty cool on its own. The fact that it was just as simple as me saying, put get, replace this module and have it do something else. Well, once I was able to do that, I was able to do the same thing with I/O. So now you've got the ability to do an XHR request in your browser. You just say y.io URL with all your callbacks. I did the exact same thing. I just went on the server and I said, this is the new I/O module. Now I'm going to use Node's built-in functions to be able to go out and fetch that resource for me and bring it back. So now my code's exactly the same in the browser as it is on the server. So that whole part, just made it click. The fact that YUI is so able to be minutely changed and make it do something that it's not supposed to do. I wanted to see how much I could get it to do. So enough with the slides. I'm done with those. That was all we had. So now I'm going to show you the code. So what I tried to do was I tried to see what I could do to make the library work. You guys see that back there? Nice and clean? Good. So you can see in here that I'm just requiring YUI. I've got my standard normal stuff. I mean, this is all stuff that you would see on a web page. I'm just asking it for JSON, I'm asking it for base, and I'm asking it for YQL. Well, under the hood, this thing was able to actually go out to the CDN and fetch it and bring it in and load it into my instance. Now, on the server, that's not a really good idea. You don't really want that to happen all the time. So I made our get on the server a little smarter. What if we could pull it from the file system and load it up there? So then when I'm able to do a YUI use, it does exactly what it's supposed to do because it's using get. And under the hood, my get is doing the right thing and actually looking for it on the server and picking up the files and putting them into the YUI object on its own. So we can see I've got y.logs, just like they normally would. I've got a sample base class. You can see in here I've got my sample base class. I'm extending y.base. I'm firing an event, publishing them. I mean, all the same normal YUI code that you would use. But you don't need a DOM for this. I mean, why would you need a browser to be able to just do this simple stuff. So, you can see there's a YQL request. That is the exact same code that you would use on the server, or that you would use on the client, but now you can use it on the server to go out and fetch YQL. And then we've got our JSON parsing. Exact same stuff. So if I execute this, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff spit across the screen. But if we look, you can see YUI is loading. You can see get right here. You can see that YUI is pulling itself in, and there's get. Get is actually fetching a local file from my machine and putting it in. So that was kind of simple stuff. And there's the JSON parsing, but you can see here there's the YQL request. That it actually went out to YQL and queried the GitHub API, I believe. And there's the result. But the beauty of it is the fact that that code is exactly the same code that you would put in a web browser, and it would just work. So I played around with it a little bit more, and I wanted to see what else I could do. So I got I/O working. So you can see here, I'm actually asking for JSON I/O. One of the things in my last talk, I actually showed that you had to put in something different on the server, like a different transport on the server, because I'm using YUI's I/O has the ability to define a transport to say, this is how I want you to go fetch my data. So we have the built-in XDR transport, which goes and uses Flash if you don't have XDR available in your browser, and it loads it up and fetches a remote resource. So I was using the exact same thing under the hood, but I was just creating my own transport, my own Node.js transport. But I didn't like the fact that I had to change my code. So I made the YIO module on the server act like it does in the client, and its default transport is the Node.js transport. So it's going to go out and it's going to use Node.js's built-in HTTP clients and actually go out and fetch it. So now there is absolutely no difference in this y.io call than there would be in the browser. So I can take this exact same module and I can put it in my assets directory and I can load it up in a browser and it's going to do what it wants to do. It's going to do its thing. It's going to go out and get its resource. I could take that same module and I could run it on the server and it's going to do the exact same thing. So now I've coded it once, but I get it twice. That's the goal. So as I started playing around with this more and more and more, I wanted to push its limits. I wanted to see what else I could do. So naturally, the next thing was to see how can I get a DOM? How can I get HTML? So I started playing around with this little app, this module for Node called JS DOM, and it's basically a DOM written in JavaScript. So I wanted to see if I could make it do anything special, and I was. Since how all of this stuff just works like it does in the browser, all I had to do was tell the YUI instance, this is the document that you want to work off of. Because one of the little hidden features that YUI has that not a lot of people know about is that each YUI instance has a configuration. And that configuration tells, whether debug is on or where you get your files from. Do you use a combo handler? How do you output your logs? Any of that. But it also has a reference to the window in the document that thing is supposed to use. Now, this is something very special that I had added to YUI because I needed it for editor. Because editor, I don't know if anybody knows how editors work, but they have an iframe that they have to deal with. One of the problems with YUI 2 was the fact that iframe, since how it is in a different document, I couldn't load any of YUI inside of it and run with it. I couldn't run, I didn't have selector, I didn't have event, I didn't have the things that I needed to have to work inside of that external document. That was one of the core features of YUI 3 is the fact that config controls what window and what document that it runs off of. So I was able to actually tell it in that iframe sense, here's the document and here's the window that you want to work off of. So now in the YUI 3 editor, I have a YUI instance bound to that iframe. So now I've got selector and I've got event. I can do drag and drop, I can do animation, I can do everything that I wanted to do because YUI is smart enough that its internals work off of that config. That's what gave us this power here. Now that I've got that, I can create a different document and bind it to any YUI instance. So I could have 10 YUI instances in my little script, and I've got 10 documents that don't ever touch each other. That's huge. Now imagine if you could put that in a request callback for, say, a web server. So now each request that comes in has its own little document. You don't have to worry about it ever touching anybody else's because they're all unique and individual. So as I started playing around with it here, I was able to get a document to render. I was able to get any of this. And you can see the logs up here. You can see that selector is actually running. And I'll show you the code here. You can see all I'm doing is using Node, just like you would in the browser. Nothing special, nothing extra added to the use statement, just say use Node. And inside of my callback, I have a fully functional document. And Node and selector are bound to it. So you can see here, I'm creating an eye, adding a class to it, appending it to the body. I can even use shortcuts too if I really wanted to, like, cut and paste an old script in here. But you can see that I've got all kinds of YUI goodness in here. I've got YUI all. There was so much that just worked out of the box. So I wanted to see how much farther I could push it. So I was able to get a YUI overlay to render. And I didn't change the overlay code. I didn't have to do a single thing to it. It just did the right thing because YUI did the right thing under the hood, since how this widget was running off of YUI core, and YUI core knew what document and what window it was bound to. It just worked. And I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, hey, we actually have a fully rendered DOM on the server, so you can look at the code. That is cut and paste from the example. I changed absolutely nothing in that code. I went to developer.yahoo.com/YUI3. I pulled up an overlay example. I cut and pasted it right from the landing page, dropped it into my Node.js script, and it worked. That's amazing. I thought that was just simply totally awesome. I couldn't stop. I kept going. I wanted to see how much more I could do. So I was able to get a YUI3 tab view to run. Again, I changed nothing. I went straight to the developer website and I cut and pasted the examples directly into it. Because that was my goal. My goal was to make it run as smooth and as simple as possible. I thought that was fantastic. I mean, I was like totally excited when I saw that. But you know what else I wanted? I wanted something a little more hardcore, something a little harder than that. So I was able to get the YUI 2 and 3 project to work. Because the 2 and 3 project wraps up YUI 2 and sticks it inside of a YUI 3 sandbox. That's huge. Because now YUI 2 was running on top of YUI 3. So now I'm able to actually go out and pull in a YUI 2 widget and render it on the server. How about a YUI 2 calendar? 100% rendered on the server with zero change. Again, I went to the developer site. I pulled up an example that I wanted to see run. I cut and paste the code, and it worked. There it is. Nothing special, nothing new. It just worked. So I'm like, that's pretty cool. Calendar's a pretty big little widget to be rendering. I wanted to see if I could get even farther than that, and I got a layout manager to run. So I was able to render an entire YUI 2 layout on the server, and that was pretty slick too. So I wanted to see how far I could really push it, and I got a YUI 2 data table to render on the server and fully render the entire thing. Whoa. Okay, so I got an error on that one. I blame Isaac over there for breaking NPM on me. Try to figure out why that. Hang on a second, let me roll back my JS DOM before somebody broke it. There we go. And you can thank Isaac for NPM on me being able to roll back that quick. So there we go. We've got an entire data table. You can see, everything in there. We got class names, IDs, all of it. That's huge. I mean, data tables are huge, huge widget. So being able to render that on the server got me thinking, what more could I do with all this stuff? So I was able to get Gallery to work too, because Gallery works just like YUI 3 does. It works just like the 2 and 3 project does. So that allows me to be able to pull your code and run it on the server. And that was, that was pretty slick too. The fact that I could go out and fetch Gallery modules. So you can see here that I'm actually using the Gallery YQL version. Instead of the YQL version that, the YQL widget that I put in, we're using the one that I put in Gallery so people could test it and run it. And it works because everything else works. And YQL was able to work because I made JSON-P work. Well, JSON-P was able to work because I made get work. Remember how I was telling you that I rewrote get? Well, that just made JSON-P work out of the box. It didn't have to change anything because y.get did what it was supposed to do, and it went out and fetched a URL, and it returned that information back. So I mean, it was phenomenal that this stuff worked this way. So even more, I started pushing it farther and farther, and I was able to get a YUI 3 slider to render. So I was able to get almost every widget that I tried to run to render on the server with no problem. And that was truly amazing. That definitely showed us some cool stuff. But one of the other things that I was trying to figure out too was what else could we use this for on the server? Not just rendering a page or whatever. How many of you guys have ever written a screen scraper? They suck, don't they? I mean, it's horrible trying to write a screen scraper to actually go on and pull somebody else's page in and do something with that data. It's a nightmare. Well, I figured out that I could actually do that with YUI in this case, and it was really, really simple. What if I could tell you that I could take a remote page and wrap a YUI instance around it? Now I've got selector. I can grab whatever the hell I want. That to me was a really good defining point of the fact that this is just working the way it is. And it's just phenomenal to be able to do it. So I'm going to show you this little example, and I'll actually show you this running example here in a minute. But you can see here I'm creating a YUI instance. Can you guys read that? Okay, nobody said no, so I assume you can. So you can see here that I'm actually using YUI with Node and IO. And then here I'm doing another YUI use. Now the reason I'm creating a second instance here is that I want to use this outside instance as the page I'm working on. So say I'm working on this page that's proxying data from somebody else. And that's my outside instance. But I'm going to create this inside instance, and I've actually, instead of calling it Y at the end there, I'm calling it remote page. That way we can see the difference between the two different instances here. And you can see that outside instance is a totally separate document than that inside instance. So now, I, for a lack of a better term, I use the word fetch, which I will probably change to load, considering that what I'm doing under the hood is pretty much what node.load will do. But you can see here that I'm fetching this URL. So I'm actually going to grab the news headlines from Dig. And at this point, what this fetch actually does is it does an I/O call, which goes out and hits this URL, takes the HTML content from it, and just does a document.enter.html on it. But it's doing it on this remote page's instance. So now I have a fully functioning document bound to that other website's HTML. That's huge. I mean, that's monstrous, because now I got selector. I can walk through and do anything that I want with it, and they can go in and add a span around something, and I don't have to worry about it anymore, because my selector is going to say, give me all the H1s with an A. I don't care whatever else is in between. Just give me those. And then I implemented DOM2's import node, so I could actually move a node from one document to another. So now, if you guys are reading this, I mean, I tried to comment it really well, because the first time I shot this thing over to somebody, they were confused as hell what they were reading. So I had to add in all the comments so people could actually see exactly what it's doing. But you can see that it's going through, and after it fetches the page, it's going to grab all the news items, all the H3s, and it's going to iterate over all those with an each, because now they're a node list. And as I do, I'm going to grab the A out of it, and I'm going to pull it into my other document. So basically, I'm pulling in dig. I'm going to grab all their news stories. I'm going to get their names, and I'm going to get their URLs. But then I'm going to build a UL list on my site that shows that. Ooh. Again. Which one fixed that? 18 or 17?
I'm running 19.
You're running 19? There we go. Again, NPM to the rescue in the middle of my presentation. So you can see that that's a plain page. There's nothing more there than just the UL with the list. But each one of those news items is the exact href that I pulled in when I queried dig. Now that makes screen scraping fun. I mean, you could do all kinds of cool stuff with it. I mean, imagine the automated stuff that you could do by being able to ping a website and pull in a page and then walk through all the A's and find out if there's a title tag on all of them. Or how about pulling in all the images to see if there's an alt tag on it? It's a really nice way to go back and check your own work to make sure that you got your stuff done right. You could write a couple of simple little tests like this using YUI test that goes out and fetches all this stuff and says, hey, there are 29 images on this page, but only 28 of them have an alt tag. And I can even spit the image out and show you. That's the awesome part. I could print the image right out and say, here, this is the image you forgot. Go back and fix it. And that's really monstrous when it comes to all the really, really cool stuff that you could do with that. I mean, I've always hated screen scraping, but this, that was really cool. So as I started playing with more of this stuff, I started figuring out how I could actually use this to build a better system, for us to build web pages, because it's really difficult to put together, like a giant templating system to say that I've got this navigation over here on the left, and every time I render this page, I got to turn one of these things on so somebody knows where they're at. Wouldn't that be so much easier in JavaScript if I could just put a selector in there and say add class? And that's it. So I started playing around with Express. I mean, have anybody in here played with Express.js? So, well, Express.js is kind of like a Sinatra for JavaScript. So for running on top of Node, it's a really easy way to build really quick web apps. And it has this nice little rendering engine inside of it that you can put together like these views and these partials and like stitch together a page and show it to somebody based on a certain set of criteria. But the thing that bothered me is that it's the same with almost every other templating engine, is it's all strings. They got this giant pile of strings that they're just concatenating together before they print it out to the screen. Well, what I want a DOM. The whole time this thing is rendering, I want to be able to mess with it. I want to be able to turn it on and off. I want to tweak it. I want to add a little something here or there. I want to check to see if their browser sucks, and I want to show them a screen. I want to do all kinds of different things that don't have something to do with strings. So I started playing with Express, And I was able to make a rendering engine out of this stuff that I'm working on. So I was able to actually take YUI and put it inside of Express.js and give me the templating engine that I've been asking for a long time. So now I'm going to show you the actual server. I'm going to show you the demo of this thing actually running. That is a demo of Express running. Now, the really nifty part is that the entire thing was written in YUI. It was all written in JavaScript, and through the course of this thing rendering, I'm changing its output through YUI JavaScript. I'm using selector to query. I'm using selector to query this item here to turn on the shadow underneath of it. One line, and I was able to do that. So I wanted to see how much more I could do. So this is a sample of how Express works. I tell it to get / up here in the top. And that's the path that it's going to take. And then I'm going to tell it what page to render. So it's going to render the index.html page. So basically I've got a layout page that wraps around it, and I've got this index.html page which has some kind of content in it, and I'm going to stitch the two of them together. Now that's what most normal templating systems do, is they just stitch these two pieces together, and then they run some kind of string substitution on it to swap out whatever strings need to be done, and then they spit it out to the screen. Well, I didn't like that. So what I was able to do was, during this render sequence, it puts it together, and it actually gives me a full DOM to mess with. So as this thing is rendering, instead of it stitching together all these strings, it does that. You know, it does what it's supposed to do. But then it takes that and it drops that inside of a DOM and then attaches that to a YUI instance and then lets me start messing around with it. So you can see here that all I'm doing is I'm setting the title and I'm adding a class to this one item in the nav. And that's how I got my little navigation to show up. You know, just done. But the cool thing is that the layout for this is a static HTML file. There's no logic in layout whatsoever. The logic is right there. Just let me add a class. So I'm like, okay, so what if I wanted 3 different pages to run from the same template, and all I want to do is mess around with a little bit of it? That's where this example comes in. You got page 1. You can see, I don't know if you guys can see it in the back, but there's a shadow around page 1. That shows that it's actually active. You can see in the code that that's all I did. All I had to do was use a simple selector and say, give me that one item, and add a class to it to tell me it's selected. That's monstrous. I don't have this giant case statement saying, if I'm on page 1, add class. If I'm on page 2, add class. I don't have that. I can just go in and use my one line and change it. So then I was able to do it with, page 2 and 3. They're pulling the exact same page, you can see here. The exact same HTML page. But now my title were different, and my selected was different, because I was able to, live, while that thing was rendering, just go in and say, drop a class on this thing. Just set the inner HTML of the title. That's all I want you to do. So I thought that was kind of cool. So then the dig scrape, right? So here's the actual example of that dig scrape. So I was able to go out and fetch all the news items from dig and be able to show it. So you can actually see. There it is. Windows 1.0 turning 25. Exactly the same things. So that's powerful right there. That's huge. When I started getting that to work, I'm like, this is totally awesome. So now, going back to some of my examples, I showed you loading a calendar using YUI, using YUI 3 on the server, pulling a YUI 2 calendar. Well, how about if I was able to render that to the screen? No JavaScript. There is no JavaScript here. but this calendar will work. That's awesome. That is totally awesome because now, again, with this example, all I did was go to the developer.yahoo.com site and I pulled a calendar example and I cut and pasted into the thing to make it run. The only thing I had to do is I actually had to hook in the fact that these links work. You know, the fact that when you click on one of these things, it's passing parameters up at the top. Now, I'm gonna explain why I'm showing these demos the way I am. These first two demos are actually going to show YUI 2, and it's going to show YUI 2 working with no JavaScript. Because YUI 2 was not designed the way YUI 3 was, I can't show those examples the way that they should be shown. But I will show you the YUI 3 example the proper way. So I just want you guys to mentally get in the fact that these are running this way. So here's a YUI 2 data table, and figures. That data table didn't run on 19, it ran on 18. There we go. Looks like I got some bugs to fix after this thing. So this is that exact same one I showed earlier of the data table rendering. And there's no JavaScript here either, but I can actually go through and click on the headers and sort them. Because it's passing through the link at the top, and then all I'm doing on the server is just say reordering this data and dumping it back into the data table like it's supposed to. So that was all well and good, but that doesn't show the principle of what YUI 3 widgets are going to be like. And that's what this next demo does. This next demo is showing you the tab view that I showed you earlier, rendering flat out to the screen. This one actually renders it. And you'll see that it works. Now, there's the HTML. It rendered that entire tab view on the server. And then on the client, all I had to do was put in a couple of lines of JavaScript to tell TabView, activate this markup. It didn't have to modify anything. It didn't modify any of the DOM under the hood. All it did was attach event listeners and say, okay, now I'm live. Now I'll do what I'll normally do. So what if I had to have JavaScript disabled? I still have a tab view. And it still works. That's the awesome part. That's the part that really shows what this is about. It's the fact that I can render this entire thing on the server. I have my progressive enhancement up front because I know this thing's going to work. But then if you've got JavaScript, cool, go right ahead. Do your thing, light it up. Let me click my tabs. Because the problem that I'm trying to solve here is not the amount of people that don't have JavaScript, which thanks to Nicholas, we know there's a whole lot of them. But there's a whole lot of people that don't have JavaScript yet when they're looking at these pages. Because I live in the Midwest. Our data sucks. It's horrible. And if I go to pull up a page, there's no guarantee that JavaScript's going to download for me in under 2.5 minutes. So shouldn't I still be able to click and see something? and not have to wait and watch a little spinner spin because my JavaScript is taking forever to load because of the fact that I'm on a crappy 3G connection in the middle of a cornfield somewhere? No, I should be able to check my dig headlines whenever the hell I feel like it. Plain and simple. And that's what this is all about. It's not. I'm not trying to show that we have to do everything that with JavaScript not on, but it should still function 90% if it's not there. If there's a link, don't let me hit a damn pound. I don't want to see a pound up in the URL when my JavaScript's not loaded yet. This would allow me to do that because of the fact that I've got the exact same code running on the client that's running on the server. I get to code it once, but now I get to use it twice. So, that shows a lot of it. But the really cool stuff is this part down here at the bottom. This is the stuff I've been having a blast doing. So, 90% of your sites, you have this one layout that goes with 99% of all these pages. Everything has its navigation on the side, and a little header at the top, you got a little content in the middle. But what about that one that doesn't look like everything else? That one page that you have to show like a EULA or a registration form or something like that everything else changes except the middle piece. Normally that means you've got to go write all this crap to figure out that this page is different than everybody else. Well, what if I could do that in 2 lines of JavaScript? Now I have total control over this layout, because if you hadn't noticed by looking at it, this is using YUI2 grids. So we've got our navigation panel over here, we got our content, we got our header. So using, let me turn my JavaScript back on so you could actually see the code. There's the 2 lines. So all I did on the server was I said, give me the navigation, remove it. Now what's really awesome about that is it's not like it's a CSS rule planted on the page and just say, display none. It's not even there. I deleted it on the server before I even bothered to spit the thing out. So now my content's down. I'm not shipping crap that I don't need, but I've got total control over my layout. And then that second line, all it does is change the class. So I'm just using YUI grids, and I'm just saying, hey, take the class name that said that I've got a left navigation, and replace it with the one that says I don't have any. That's awesome. I mean, that is totally awesome. That is like the templating engine that we've all dreamed of having. So playing around with it a little bit more, I started playing around with the fact that I didn't like the way my code was looking. It was killing me that I would have large chunks of code like this stuck in this after. So this after was something that I put inside of Express.js that said, after you're done doing all this rendering, take your render and throw it into a YUI instance so I could use it. And that just annoyed me. It just felt wrong that every time I had to do something, I had to jump over into this other place, to say do this. So I turned around and I made a pre-renderer. This was the page we were just looking at. So you can see up there I'm telling it to render pre. So like before I would call, up here I would actually call resource.render on the HTML. And then I'd have all my funky stuff that I have to do down here in the after. Well, in this case, inside my request, I actually have a Y instance ready. So it's kind of like simple YUI. The fact that request.y gives me an entire DOM inside of my request, and I can just tell it to swap out, do a little substitution here. Now the reason I keep showing that substitution is that some people might not know that YUI 3 has their language packs in it, so we could localize our widgets. What if we could just put that little localization right there? I'm done. All my strings are taken care of. Then I could use YUI 3's built-in localization to be able to localize all of my content without having to hard-code it inside of my server. But now, here we go. I've got a render, and all I'm doing inside of there is I'm saying, give me the document, change the title, add a class. That allows me to do, ooh, damn. Back to 19. You got to love that. There we go. So you can see that it actually was able to render all of that inside of the resource. So now I'm down to just having say, this is the URL I want. Now just put my layout together and give me the JavaScript when you're done. So it'll do all of it and hand me my YUI instance. So now I can just walk through that resource and do everything that I want to do. So that I thought was pretty cool. That made it nice and clean. I understood what I was looking at. So I started messing around a little bit more, and I'm like, well, what would happen if I took the user agent string that was hitting this thing and attached it to that YUI instance? So now my YUI instance has a y.ua that mimics whatever they gave to me. So now I know who you are. Now I can do some pretty cool stuff. So you'll see that this is a white background. If I looked at this as anything other than WebKit, it would be gray. Because I'm able to look at it on the server and say, hey, you're running WebKit. I'm going to throw in this extra CSS file for you. Or if you're running IE, I could put in this giant CSS file and these 12 JavaScript files to make you actually act right. But now I can fix it. But I don't have to give everybody what he needs. Why should I have to give you something that you don't need? That's the whole core of YUI 3. Only give you what you need. So this gives you what you need. Now, I forgot to bring my iPad with me, but the whole idea is that I could actually base this off of the way that YUI's dependency handler works. So the way the dependency handler works in YUI is that if you load up the drag and drop page from a device that supports touch, I'm going to go out and fetch all the touch-related code and give it to you. So then you don't have to worry about drag and drop. It just works. This works the same way. So what if I was able to say, you're on mobile? Add a new header. Put this new chunk of code in because you're on a mobile device. Now for this example, again, no iPad, it would actually put in the meta tags. Because you're mobile, it's going to put in the meta tag for the app icon to save it to the home screen, and it's going to put in the meta tag to fill up the viewport. That's all it actually does. But I just wanted to show you the ability of being able to do that. And then, how about the fact that I could check a host inside of it and say, hey, you're coming from this M dot. iPad. Got an iPad. Awesome.
I'll take it. I always wanted one.
Flip your, there we go. So if you guys can see that, that's actually expanded to the screen because of the fact that it has the header name in it. Instead of it showing this over here on the side, it's expanded to the full size. And if you go over here and add to home screen, if I can actually tap it, there you go. But I didn't have to ship all that code. I didn't have to send it to everybody. I only sent it to the devices that I knew I needed to send it to. Thank you. And you see down here, here's the WebKit one. This says if I'm on WebKit, throw in this extra CSS file to make it white. And then we've got our mobile here that I could check against, say, if I've got every domain pointed here, are you at M dot? Cool. And then I'm going to do all this cool stuff. Well, now that I can do that, why couldn't I just do a really simple nag bar? So you can see here, look, if you're IE and you're less than 8, you get nagged to put that across the top. And of course, if you're at this URL, so I could show you the nag bar, considering I'm not using IE. And then how about this? What if I wanted to go in and say, hey, you're IE less than 8, and your browser sucks, so I want to say y.all script, remove. You don't get any of my JavaScript. y.all link, remove. You don't get any of my CSS either. I mean, that's awesome. Now, what if you could actually put in a little check in here to say these are all the search bots. These are the bots that I know. Don't give them the CSS because they don't need to take up my bandwidth. I don't need to pay for them to pull in my CSS. I don't need to pay for them to pull in my JavaScript. Don't. Here, there's your HTML. That is some cool stuff. I mean, that's the stuff that I've been having a ball with.
And you get blacklisted from Google because you send them an extra version.
Yeah, well, I've been blacklisted by them before. So that's what I've got. I mean, this is what I've been working on for a while.